to your Pelvic Health Podcast. My name is Susan Winograd. I'm the owner-founder of Pelvicore Rehab, and I am happy to be your host. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Today's episode is actually really special because I have a guest on that I probably spend more time with than my own family. I have Heather Koerner here today. She's an acupuncturist, a doctor of Chinese medicine, and she also happens to be a past patient of mine and my co-tenant at Pelvicore Rehab. Heather, welcome to your Pelvic Health Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have Heather because we can spend hours talking. And I said to Heather the other day, I'm like, we got to get this on record and share some of this good information. Heather, could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to the meat and potatoes of how we work together, and just what led you to acupuncture?
Sure. Well, you were a really big part of my healing journey. It all started with a diagnosis of endometriosis. I had horrific, painful periods, a lot of chronic pelvic pain. I went through surgery. I took hormones. I did a drug called Lupron for 6 months, which originally started as a cancer drug to suppress estrogen. And through all of that, nothing helped. And eventually my doctor said, why don't you try pelvic floor therapy? And at the time, this was back in 2010, there wasn't really anyone local, and I was living in Vero Beach. So I was driving 2 hours twice a week to Orlando.
Wow.
But after the first session, it was clear that this was going to be the thing. This was going to be the breakthrough. I had a lot of hope. Finally, the only thing that gave me hope. So that really helped. And then years later, back into some chronic stress patterns, my pelvic floor flared up again. And I was now working as an acupuncturist, and a patient of mine suggested you as a pelvic floor therapist. So I went, and instantly I knew that you were a cut above. You were, you did things that the other pelvic floor therapists didn't do. You were looking at my feet and my breathing, and there was more of a holistic approach. And, I left with my foot taped up and thought, wow, this is so different, and it was so in alignment with my acupuncture philosophy that everything is connected. So, when we instantly had a resonance, we knew that we were going to work together someday in some way, somehow, that we were soul sisters and we were going to be on this journey together. It's
so true. There are some clients that pass through your door and you just know that you're going to have a long lasting connection with them. I remember very quickly feeling very connected with you, and we started collaborating professionally, and I started sending you clients. And everybody instantly said that was the best recommendation that I had made to them as well. What do you wish you would have known in the beginning of your pelvic healing journey that you know now? And sort of how did the whole experience of pelvic health change your mindset of healing?
Sure. I wish somebody had approached me with more of an integrative mindset, had given me tools to deal with it more naturally prior to having surgery and hormones and all of that. I don't fault them. They were doing what they knew how to do. And some of it felt better initially, but my body was still screaming. So I wish I had had those tools. I wish I would have felt more empowered instead of feeling like such a victim of the diagnosis. So I think had I found those earlier, it would have been a quicker journey. It would have been much less stressful, much less painful. And so I feel like pelvic floor physical therapy was definitely the piece that gave me hope. And I knew, I can do this. I can turn this around.
I think what you just said was so powerful, that you felt like a victim of your diagnosis. And I think part of the thing that we try to change the mindset with people at Pelvicore Rehab is that we need to stop pathologizing everything and catastrophizing everything. Yes, there was something going on in your body, but I think we need to change and flip the story to there are strategies that we can teach you for long-term healing. And I think our mission at Pelvicore Rehab is really to empower people so that they have strategies for life. So if anything comes up in the body, they learn to receive those signals and they understand how to communicate with their body best so they can immediately implement those healing strategies and resources that we've taught them. So I thank you so much for saying that. And I think we should also just acknowledge that it's really sometimes not easy to discuss your personal story on a podcast. So I thank you for that. And I do think that it's so important because I can come on as a physical therapist and really talk about the power of healing and what we can do to heal. But I think what people really want to hear is other people's healing stories, because I truly believe that that gives people the most hope in healing. I recently had a patient with complex pain, and we were doing great. And there was like a little piece of that puzzle, like that last 20% that we couldn't sort of break through. It was like, that ceiling we hit and we just knew we needed to break through. But I also knew that piece was bigger than myself. And I said, well, what do you think you need to get through that last 20%? And he said, I need to talk to people. I need to know that there are other people that have experienced what I went through, and I want to talk to them and I want to hear about their life on the other side of pain. So I think that's really what you're doing for them today, Heather. And I truly appreciate that. I think it's tremendous. So Heather and I, we work together and we chat a lot. And we actually, as we live together in our office, we have started really collaborating on a lot of clients and seeing dramatic changes in our outcomes as we continue to work together in all patients, but particularly ones with erectile dysfunction and complex pain. Heather, why do you think we are seeing such profound results as we collaborate together? What do you think it is about acupuncture that so complements what we do as pelvic health physical therapists?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is nervous system regulation. When you are in a state of fight or flight, your body is only focused on keeping you alive, sending blood to your brain, to your heart. It's safety, survival. When we can tamp down the adrenaline, the cortisol, and regulate that nervous system, it can now shift into healing because it knows that you're okay. So I always say, I'm just giving your body a message of safety. I'm telling it it's okay. We can start the healing process. So that's huge. And then the other way that in Chinese medicine, we look at pain, discomfort, disease is contraction. So if things are not flowing, there's not good communication between the body, there's going to be a pain signal because the body is telling you, hey, something's wrong. I wish someone had said that to me, like, why are you having this pain? Like, are you chronically stressed? How are you eating? What's going on? Like, let's tune into the body and ask it, what does it need? So those are the two things. We open, promote flow, and regulate the nervous system. And I think those are really integral for any sort of healing.
Right. We do at Pelvicore Rehab, as I've mentioned 25,000 times, we use a biopsychosocial approach to treating. And I think that you do it and we do it in a different way, but in a way that brings out the best in each other, right? I feel like the way that we do it really helps to bring to the surface the results that we're trying to see. And we've been seeing just such amazing outcomes. I just want to say, and I said this to Heather a million times when I was looking to change offices, the only person that I considered sharing space with was Heather. And I called her one day and I said, Heather, I need to switch offices. Would you be interested in sharing space with me? And she said, are you kidding me? I decided to move last week. So it was truly meant to be. And I believe that our paths crossed initially for a certain reason, and they came together at a certain point in time for a certain reason. And I think that reason is for us to continue to learn from each other and to collaborate with each other. Heather, this is what I'm excited to discuss with you. Okay. Whenever we discuss a patient, Heather always sees them in her mind's eye, I believe, as a certain element of nature. And I have learned from Heather that there are elements in nature that intrinsically embody somebody's constitution, and that can so facilitate healing. Heather, can you tell us a little bit about the elements, what they mean, and we'll talk about how that lends itself to long-term healing?
For sure. Well, if you look at nature, it's a perfect system. There are things that promote each other, things that generate each other, and also things that have a certain system of checks and balances. So for instance, fire is really necessary. It gives us warmth, the sun. But if a fire gets out of control, now we have forest fires, or we need water. But if there's too much water, now we have a flood and now it's deadly, right? So there's a perfect system. And the way we do that is we overlay that onto someone and how they move through the world, and they will have characteristics of nature. And then someone else will have a characteristic of nature. And then when you put them together, like water puts out fire, right? So there's going to be a natural constriction there. So when you're a fire and you bump up against a water, there's going to be a little tension, a little constriction, right? But also, water is the mother of wood. So if you're a wood and you're around a water, you're going to get nurtured by them. You're going to feel empowered and generated by them. So it's sort of learning how people move through the world and how they receive the world.
I love that. Can you, for our listeners that don't know what the 5 elements are and how those elements move through the world, can you just sort of briefly go through each one? I know Heather says that I'm earth, which is so true. Actually, the other day I was like doing yoga, and at the end of our practice, we all got laid on our right side in a fetal position. And I came back to the office the next day and I'm like, Heather, it felt so good to lie on the earth. And I was thinking about her in that moment and how grounded and connected I felt. But can you just speak to each element and how they move through life, and just talk a little bit about each one, because I think it's fascinating.
Sure. Well, it's important to note that we have all 5 and they're all necessary. You know, we're going to maybe tap into one or the other based on what we're doing in our life, but we all have one guardian element, maybe a secondary element. But the guardian element who takes over in times of stress, it's really your promoter. It's how you get through the world. So let's start with fire. So, and also, I'm not teaching you anything new. You've experienced these things since you were little. So you know what fire is, you know what earth is, you know what water is. So if you just think about how the element acts in nature, you'll be able to figure out who you are and who someone else is. So let's start with fire, right? So let's think of examples of fire: a candle, a bonfire, right? It's upward. It's promotes warmth. You're attracted to it. When we say moth to a flame, right? So a fire is going to be very fun, uplifting. They're going to be warm and loving. So you're going to be really drawn to them. They're going to light up the room when they walk in. And then we move on to Earth. You think Mother Earth, right? So Mother Earth, she holds us. We stand in her. She's our support system. She's a matrix for things to grow. These are the people that when things are going wrong in your life, you want to call, because they're going to be warm. They're going to be supportive in nature. Then we move on to metal, which metal comes from the earth, right? So it promotes. Metal is it can be a very rigid structure. It's used for support. It's also very good at communication. So even the microphones we're speaking into are all made of metal. So they're very good at systems, creating organization, communication. And then we move on to water. So water can be a shallow puddle or it can be a deep abyss, right? So waters have a lot of depth in them. They're philosophers, they're deep thinkers. They are also very into rituals and honoring family and traditions. And then we move into wood, right? You think of wood starts as a seedling, and that seedling has a blueprint and a plan, and they are going to accomplish that plan. Whether you like it or not, they are full steam ahead. You know, we always say that woods don't, or the seedling doesn't ask for permission for the sun. Like, it's got a plan and it's going, right? It's going to grow to that sun.
Such a great analogy.
Yeah. And really how it grows in nature. So a wood grows up and out. So they are about expansion, right? A fire is up. Earth is more of like it's a circle, it's a sphere. So their energy is going to be always outward, right? Metal is going to be very inward, very contracted. And then water is always going to be very inward. So waters are not very expressive. They're deep thinkers. These are the people when you talk to them, they're sort of in their head, they're processing, and then usually what comes out is very profound.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Do you think my husband is water?
He's definitely got a lot of water for sure.
Right. We were just talking about my element before we left the office, and we were talking about the fact that I am earth. So let's talk a little bit about, Heather, what happens when you're dominant element. And, intuitively, I should have known that we embody all elements. And when you just said that, I had this aha moment that I'm like, oh, I never really thought of that. And I think that's such an important point, that we sort of embody all of them and that we have a dominant one, and we do have the ability to tap into the other elements in order to balance ourselves out. So I don't know why I had not thought of that, but it was just a profound aha moment that I had just now that I thought I would share. But tell us what happens when your dominant element is out of balance, and perhaps how that could affect healing. And you could use any example. You could use me as an example if you want to, being wood. And we just talked about a client that came in to see you the other day who was more metal. So talk about what happens when that dominant element is out of balance, please.
Sure. Well, your element is going to be the strategy that you use to get through, right? So if your strategy as an earth is to be a helper, right? If you are out of balance as an earth, if it becomes exaggerated, you're going to do more, say yes to more, when that's exactly what you don't need, right? But it's a strategy. It's what you know how to do. It's very comfortable, but that element becomes exaggerated, because if that's your primary element, the other elements don't have a chance to restrain it because they're not strong enough, right? So the way I use it in the clinic, if someone is extremely metal, extremely out of balance, I know intuitively that, or intellectually, however you want to put it, that fire melts metal, right? So if I need to really turn on the warmth, turn on the fun, turn on the charm, to really sort of allow that metal to melt a little bit and not be so contracted, because they feel really safe in their contracted state. That's how they get safety. They create boundaries, they create structure, and that's how they feel safe. So I know that I need to embody the warmth to sort of do that. So once you know how the elements work in nature, which you do, the fire puts out water. So if I'm a really deep inward water, when a fire comes, I'm going to feel a little constriction. So I know, like, oh, maybe I open up a little bit. Maybe I, seek to allow them to connect with me, which is like one of water's biggest fears is to connect, right? So it's just using the elements in the way that they work in nature that will allow for better healing. I love that.
And we, before we came to the office, Heather and I think we started communicating about our clients in terms of elements, which is so interesting. And I just had this thought, I'm having all these aha moments as we record, that, we were talking about the fact that I'm earth and that I am always wanting to give people and nurture people. And when I'm stressed, I very easily get depleted because I go into almost like giving and saying yes overload. And what I really need to do is understand that every time I'm saying yes to something, I'm really, really saying no to something else, and that I need to sort of do a little more self-care and fill my container a little bit more with self-care. And I just had this aha moment as we were talking. Remember when I went to Israel recently to visit my daughter, and I was feeling extremely depleted before I left to Israel. I was just, we were kicking off our new space, and I was in the middle of a million projects, and I went to Israel, and I came back and I'm like, Heather, I feel better. Like, I feel like I have this new perspective. I'm not stressing. I don't feel depleted anymore. And as you were just talking, I realized it's because I reset my system to tap into my element, and I was able to sort of fill my container again with what it needed. So it is super interesting, because as I live with Heather in our office, I start to like view people as elements. Can you talk a little bit about the difference of optimizing and harmonizing? I love the way that you articulate that.
Yeah. So optimization is just, how do we live our best life, as people say. So once you're self-aware of what your element needs, how to nurture it, or recognize when it's out of balance, you can give it what it needs to either contract the element a little bit or to promote the element. So that would be optimization. And harmonization is our relationships, right? So figuring out what someone else is, you can have a really great relationship. If you notice that someone is an out of balance wood or earth, you would know how to sort of shift your perspective and deal with them in a way that speaks to them, sort of like the love languages, right? When you're speaking someone's love language, they get it and you create more connection. So it's just a way to operate with more empathy for yourself and for others and just live a more harmonious life.
I love that. I love that. And I love the way that you use the analogy of disease, that disease is dis-ease. Just speak a little bit about that, just because you articulate it so much more beautifully than I do.
Yeah. So dis-ease, right? Without ease. And so in Chinese medicine, our whole philosophy is that when things are flowing, when things are in a perfect balance, we don't experience disease. We don't experience the stress and the discomfort. So knowing what your balance, how to find the balance for your element can just really help you move through the world in a way that's more easeful. That's always our approach and our outcome is ease.
I love that. And what Heather and I were also having a little bit of a conversation about is that we, at Pelvicore Rehab, we use a biopsychosocial approach, and a big, I would say, obstacle to long-term healing is worry, rumination, catastrophization. Evidence-based research actually shows that people that have a high degree of worry do not have as good outcomes for long-term healing, because if you have a high degree of worry and you're constantly thinking about that thing that you're worried about, for example, if it's coccyx pain, and you all day you're thinking about, well, I have to drive. How will I drive? How will I sit at work? How will I go to a restaurant? And you are constantly ruminating about what your life will be like when you have that pain all the time. You're essentially constantly bringing your nervous system and your brain back to that thing that's bothering you. And in our practice, in Pelvicore Rehab, we have exercises and brain remapping exercises and little exercises that we help people to train their brain away from the worry. But as I was telling Heather, I almost feel like that sort of puts a temporary Band-Aid on the person, because in order to really help them overcome that worry long term, they need to tune in and tap in to what their dominant element is, to really get to know themselves and how to nurture themselves. And then once they have that understanding of how to create that ease in their body, how to create that harmony in their body, how to optimize their system, then the exercises that we give them will be so much more effective, so much more long lasting. So again, I keep bringing up examples of how being co-tenants with you, Heather, and the collaboration that we do really, really brings another level of beauty and healing and hope and healing for all of our patients. It actually inspires me every day. I feel like I learn something from you every single day. One more question for you. We talked about this. So we sometimes get clients and we know what their element is, and we really know the steps that they need to take for healing. So in my practice, it might be certain exercises that they need to do, but in order for them to get better, there needs to be a certain level of adherence to the program, right? How do you sort of handle it when you are working with a client and you know what their element is, or what their dominant element is, and you know intrinsically that in order to heal long term, it would be so beneficial for them to tap into their element to learn how to balance it out, perhaps with the other elements. But if they're metal, let's say, for example, and they're extremely rigid and they're really not open to receiving or ready to do the work to create their balance, how do you then move forward to try to continue to promote healing and facilitate healing? It could be tough, right?
Yeah, it can be really tough. When an element is out of balance, it can be hard to shift it. So in the room, I will use whatever element I need to sort of bring them out of that element and just create a little bit of space. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to really move it, but I just need to create a little bit of space, take them out of that element a little bit so that they can feel less contraction. Because if their element is really out of balance, their body is in a state of contraction trying to restrain that element. I need that to open up. So if someone is extremely metal, I'll generally ask them about their habits. Like I would say, like, I bet your closet is color coded. They'll say yes, and by season, and by, so I know that fire melts metal. So I need to I need to really work hard to create connection. I need to go really warm, maybe even get them to laugh a little bit, because then their body can relax. It can swing them out of their element. So that's one thing that I do in the clinic. And then I'll explain to them, do you see how this is all showing up? And like, are you open to doing X, Y, or Z? Can we create a little bit of space? And it's not that they have to fix it or change it, because that's their superpower. I don't necessarily want them to go out of that, but it's exaggerated. And it was just a strategy. It's what the body knew how to do. So it's just getting them into a more adapted strategy versus such an out of balance, exaggerated strategy.
That makes so much sense to me. And in my practice, I always say we need to go under the radar of the brain. So, what I'm hearing you, and everything that in my brain always goes back to pelvic health, is that you are seeing their dominant element and you're sort of going under the radar with another element that they need to bring in, and imbuing that into them in not a passive way, but a way that they can integrate it without even realizing it. And I think that you are so masterful at that, Heather. Really masterful. Heather has a way of communicating with her clients that is so therapeutic and healing, just in the way that you communicate. And, as an acupuncturist and as a physical therapist, people might perceive us as healing by laying hands on, right? By healing by doing the acupuncture, or healing by doing manual work on people. And I think it's so important to know that healing with any healthcare provider should start from the minute you say hello. From the minute you make eye contact, there should be that quiet communication, that there should be this feeling of safety even before you lay hands. And I think that you are so masterful at that.
Oh, thank you.
Really.
Yeah. If the body's in a state of fight or flight, if you come at them with hands, it's just going to contract even more, because everything is a threat. So much of the work gets done in the intake when we're talking, just allowing the rapport to be created and to allow the body to relax so that it doesn't see us as another threat.
Right. I love that. And, that is such a tribute to you. And I'm just going to tell all the listeners out there that when Heather and I were building out our office, Heather had 3 treatment rooms that were going to be designated to her. And as she's decorating the office, I see that only 2 of the rooms have treatment tables in them. And she created this little conversation room as one of her treatment rooms. And I think you did that because, well, I don't want to say what you did, but from my perspective, knowing you and looking into it, you intuitively knew that you needed to create a space where you can promote trust and create that therapeutic alliance and conversation before you even lay hands on them. And I think that's so important and necessary for healing long term, right?
Yeah, I need them to know that it's a safe space. And then their story is important. What they're going through in their daily life. They're only on the bed 30 minutes, but how many hours are in a week? And I think it's 160 hours are in a week. So I need to know what's happening outside of there. So if they're going through a very stressful event, I know that they're in a state of contraction. I know when they leave the room, they're going to get hit again in a certain area. So it's really important for me to find out all facets of what's happening for them, because again, you and I both share a very holistic view of the person. We don't break the body up into parts. It's one working piece. So all of that is really important.
Right. And so many times, just giving the patient or the client the opportunity to tell their story is the most therapeutic part. It's the most validating part, because very often we are the first ones that really actually take the time to listen to their story. So, again, it's just another way that we're in sync with each other. Heather, I might have to have you on again because I feel like I could actually talk to you for hours. We do talk for hours in the office. It's a miracle that we get any work done, which we do. Before we go off, can you just give us some takeaways that you would like our listeners to walk away with and really sort of absorb from our conversation?
I think in terms of the elements, I think it's really important to identify. On my website, I do have a little quiz that you can take if you want to identify your element. And then also I have what to do if you are. So there are tips. It's not like you just find out your element and then you go, now what? I do have tips and how to deal with other elements. I think it's just really important to identify that and then to figure out how to, I say, nurture your nature.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, we don't want to swim upstream. We want to work with our superpowers and our strengths and identify our weaknesses and know how to work with them in a way that's really harmonious and not so stressful because the world is already stressful enough. So
I love that. I love that. Well, Heather, thank you so much. I feel like you're brilliant. And if anybody's looking for an acupuncturist, Heather is absolutely the only person that you should go to. Heather, could you tell us where people can find you?
Sure. I am in East Boca in Susan's space. So we are at 350 Camino Gardens Boulevard, Suite 102. You can also go on eastbocaacupuncture.com. And then there's also a link to book on there. So you don't even have to call. You can just click and find a spot that works for you and get on the calendar. Yeah,
love it.
That's where we're at.
Love it. Or you could just call me and I will direct you straight to Heather. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of your Pelvic Health Podcast, where we give you the real lowdown on pelvic health. Please reach out at www.pelvicorerehab.com with any comments or questions. Let us know what you'd like to hear more of. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your shows. And remember to like, follow, and please give us a 5-star review. Those 5-star reviews help us to continue to bring you more episodes and spreading awareness on all things pelvic health related. And always keep in mind that you need to be your own best advocate and that healing requires a total body approach.